Fund. And then it runs through the next Saturday, November 9th. And if people want more information, they can go to the community college website, lcc.edu /library, and it's all there.
There's another LCC event coming up. They're kicking off their fund drive on Friday night at 5 o'clock down at the Avenue. I haven't heard the final roster of bands coming, but I think they have quite a few bands coming, right? Is that right?
I haven't heard the band roster either, but I do know that there's entertainment.
Entertainment all night
Free.
long, right? Well, no, there's a fee at
Well,
the door, but there's going to be, that's the kickoff to this year's pledge drive. And that's an important event. They have revived the annual pledge drive in the spring and in the fall to try to raise some more friends and funds for the radio station. So we'll be talking to you a bit more about that on Monday night.
and we'll have to do an outrageously interesting program on Monday
Yes,
for
yes,
'em.
yes. Or at least one that attracts a wildly rich audience.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think either Bill or I know too many people that fall into that category. But we do have two guests tonight. Who knows? Maybe they're secret billionaires,
Yeah,
and we
right.
don't know that. We have Walt Sorg of Lansing City Pulse with us, and we have Emily Lawler of MERS. And I ran into Emily on Friday night, and it was a story that she and I have been covering for an awfully long time. It's about Steve and Maria Green.
Definitely. Steve and Maria Green have a baby named Bree, and they also happen to be registered medical marijuana patients. And there was the Child Protective Services at some point came in about a month and a half ago and took Bree away from the parents because of the marijuana. There were no allegations of anything else. It seemed like this case was based solely on, the fact that Steve and Maria Green were medical marijuana patients, which is interesting because in the statute for medical marijuana, it says that your parenting rights aren't interrupted by you being a patient.
For patients and caregivers, because Maria is also a caregiver. I got to know the couple back in January, oddly enough, because I went down on a snowy Friday to the State of Michigan Library where they were having a public hearing on whether PTSD should be added to the list of conditions that people could be authorized to use for medical marijuana. What was kind of interesting was that Steve Green was testifying. First, he was going to testify about a friend, but he decided that he would go ahead and talk about his own circumstance. He's severely epileptic. He has tonic-clonic seizures. They do brain damage each time. It's life-threatening. And he had been on 30 psychotropic medications every day, 30 pills a day at high cost, and was foggy and quite honestly kind of like a zombie until he found cannabis oil. And then he takes cannabis oil that doesn't get him high, but it does control his seizures. Prior to that, he was having 4 to 5 seizures a month. After that, he was not having any. And so it was this remarkable improvement. But what happened was, down in Oakland County, somebody was robbing the neighbor. And as they were running away with the stolen goods, they stopped by the Green's garage while they were out of town, broke in, and the police followed them and found this marijuana operation, which was their grow operation, and decided to confiscate everything. And, when she got back home, Maria called and said, "You want to see my paperwork? I'll come down and show it to you, prove to you everything was legal." They said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure nothing will happen." Well, they were brought up on drug manufacturing charges. And that started everything because what it did was, first of all, the Judge Leo Bowman down in Oakland County demanded that Steve no longer take cannabis oil, which meant that he started having seizures again. So to add to their grief, then Maria's ex-husband began child custody issues related to not letting her see her son because now she was under these felony charges. When they went in front of Judge Garcia 6 weeks ago on September 13th, much to everybody's surprise, he just pulled the child there, even though not only does the medical marijuana law say that you can't interfere with custody, but we've had recent changes to regulations based on that hard lemonade case, where the father inadvertently gave his kid, he thought it was just lemonade, gave him hard lemonade, and they took his son away till they sorted it out. And they've tried to change the regulations now so that they don't pull children unless it's absolutely necessary. Even if you see the youngster, as in that case, drinking alcohol, that isn't a good enough reason to pull the youngster. Find out first what's going on before you do that. So this really appeared to be a travesty. The news story made it all over the world. I know I read about it. I was down there Friday night as you were at the press conference, and the story got all the way into the British tabloid, the Daily Mail. So I was pleased to see it there. It's been rocketing around the world what happened to this couple.
Yeah,
So,
definitely, and it's still happening. There's still a case going on, and Child Protective Services could still bring something else to the table here. But, when the child was taken away originally, they were basing it pretty much solely on the fact that there were drug charges, manufacturing charges in Oakland County, which have since been dismissed. So
Yes.
I think that was kind of a game changer, and the family was reunited with their child on Friday.
What was brought up, if at all, about the hair sample showing positive
There
for
was
marijuana?
no proceeding on Friday. They hammered
Okay.
that out without any open court proceeding. So
Right.
no one knows all the negotiations
Right,
that took
but
place.
through the earlier part of the trial, it came out that, or not trial, but hearing, it came out that the child, they had wanted to test for marijuana, and the parents had said, "Go ahead. We don't, there would be nothing that showed up." And the child did test positive for a very small amount of marijuana. It's 3 picograms, which I believe, I'm not a math major here, but I believe is like literally the smallest amount that most tests can read. So.
And there has been some literature on the fact that those hair tests are wildly unreliable.
Right.
If they really wanted to be accurate, they probably should have done a blood test. But I suspect the parents didn't want the child poked unnecessarily, so that's part of the problem. But it was a long, grim siege. It was expensive. It was upsetting. I followed the case along the way and have video that shows Maria screaming literally as they're wrestling the child from her, CPS, and taking the child away. I mean, it was a brutal kind of reaction to a situation where, I mean, if we took the children away from everybody who did an illicit substance in this state, we would have to have a much larger foster care system than we currently have.
Well, we're going to take away, it appears, unemployment insurance from people who have marijuana in their system.
Oh, is that the latest?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to have to be drug tested in order to get our unemployment. Is that what's going on?
Yes.
And then we're going to have to get drug tested for this, that, and the everything. Are they going to be drug testing the Michigan Senate and Michigan Legislature? Are they going to be doing weekly drug tests? We certainly wouldn't want those people on the public payroll. Well, yeah.
Because they did offer amendment. On
Yeah, that was. I think that went down on a voice vote. I know the House. I'm not sure about the Senate.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either. It's come up a couple times though. Nobody seems too keen on the idea.
Maybe I could start a petition drive.
Now, on the unemployment, it's not mandatory testing. It's just that if you are reported by an employer to have failed a drug test or refused to take one, and the employer chooses to report it, then you can lose your unemployment. It's probable that the courts, I'm sure, will get rid of it pretty quickly. It's just, it's poorly drafted legislation. Plus, it's not going to do a darn thing.
Well, that's not the point, though, Walt.
I know,
We don't
look at-
pass legislation anymore to do things.
My column this Wednesday, I refer to as something. The primary purpose of this bill is to provide paragraphs for campaign flyers for 2014.
Yes, yes,
We're cracking down on poor people and drugs.
yes. All those people you don't like,
Yeah.
that you're sure are having more fun than you are.
Yeah.
That was the big problem with the Greens. Everybody was sure they were having more fun than they were.
If you're drawing 300, I forget what the max is for unemployment, but it's not much. If you're drawing $350 a month unemployment and you're using it to buy pot, you're not eating.
True, true. Well, and then you'd really need to eat. You'd be better off with cocaine, Walt.
Or maybe meth. And then that'll
Meth,
keep you going.
yeah, that'll do it too. Yeah, then I've watched my season of Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, we're all experts on meth now.
I had to catch up. Boy, God, that was a grim week.
Yeah, I bet.
I saw my first Breaking Bad Halloween costume a couple days ago. So.
Did
What
you?
was it? What was it?
It was it was like a father-son costume, and they had dressed up in like the scrubs, and it was pretty funny. I
Oh,
liked it.
wow.
Well, Jesse Pinkman's easy to do. That's an easy costume.
My favorite local costume was years ago. A woman that I knew went to a party as Francine Hughes. Does anybody other than Bill
Oh,
remember
sure.
who Francine?
I actually
She
did-
was the burning bed lady, and all she had to have for a costume, Walt, was a gas can. So she just, because she had poured gas on her sleeping husband and torched him. So,
I went to high school with the woman who played her sister in the movie.
oh,
She was a friend of mine in high school, and when I was doing my radio program, talked to her the day after Farrah Fawcett passed away.
oh.
And she won't get
The
off
only
air.
thing decent that Farrah Fawcett ever did.
She did a few other pretty good things too.
Did she?
But that was probably her best
I'll
performance.
bet, yeah.
But Penelope Milford played her sister in that movie, and we were buddies in high school. Somebody had to be successful, so she was it.
Did she become Penelope Miller? And
No.
she went by that name
She
in,
went by Milford. She was nominated for an Oscar.
for that role?
No, for Coming Home with
Oh.
Jane Fonda.
Ah, okay. Oh, wow.
Didn't make it though. I think she, as I recall, I think she lost to Meryl Streep.
Hmm.
Which
Okay.
doesn't everybody.
Yeah. This is LCC Radio 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Emily Lawler of MERS and Walt Sorg of Lansing City Pulse. And we were sort of wrapping up where were politically on the green issue. I think that is the other sort of update, because we've been following that issue here fairly closely on the radio show and talking quite a bit also with Lance and Forsberg about his situation. He's one of the Okama Seven. And one of the things that was sort of a heartbreaker I read by his mother's down visiting him in prison right now. She had hoped to see her husband Dennis. You know, both of them have been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for growing medical marijuana, even though they were arrested under the federal law, so the state law didn't pertain in their case. She was planning on the Christmas celebration that she would have and try to cheer Dennis up in his first Christmas in incarceration, and discovered that, guess what? No visitors over Christmas. They're short-staffed, and of course people don't get in. And it just seems that's such a crushing blow when you're already in that circumstance, you know.
The one time you want to take away visitation, it's the holiday.
Well, you know, I can understand, though, the problem is that they don't want to have the staff miss Christmas with their families, so,
They
you
don't
know.
want to pay the overtime.
They don't want
That's
to pay
it. Well,
overtime.
you're
That's
probably
it.
right. It's
Yeah.
probably more likely that. But that is sad, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they get triple time for holidays.
Well, we're cheap. We know, if nothing else, we're cheap. So what is coming up legislatively on the agenda that we should know about?
You know, I think there's a little bit about what isn't coming up. Governor Snyder has asked for two things: the Catastrophic Claims Association redo, kind of reform there, and then also a transportation package, a comprehensive package to fund the roads. And it doesn't look like either of those things has a lot of traction right now, so it'll be interesting to see if the legislature ends up taking either of those up before the end of the year, much less the end of the election cycle here.
I knew a bit about the roads, but I'm not as familiar. Is the catastrophic claims part of tort reform ideas?
It's the auto insurance reform. So there's two groups out there advocating pretty heavily. One says we have the best system in the nation, let's not change it. And then another group says, you know, let's reform this and make auto insurance
I wondered
cheaper.
what happened to that, because I actually went out, and one of the people at Origami that does the rehabilitation of the closed head injury, I did some video with them earlier in the year, which one of these days I have to edit, and preferably before the bill goes down one way or the other. But that is going to be potentially a real problem for people with that kind of severe cataclysmic injury. They're going to be hard pressed to have as decent and dignified a treatment as they would have in a place like Origami.
And the governor has called for reform. I think a week or two ago, the Detroit caucus came up with their own kind of reform plan, and there are a couple things out there, but I don't know that there's a consensus or a real big movement on any of them.
Is reform just another word for cheap again? Or is that what we're less money?
Do they want to cut?
Yes.
That's what they want to do.
That's usually, yes, that's what reform means.
Right now, like, every driver pretty much pays a flat fee, as I understand it. And then if you get in an accident and are catastrophically injured, the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association helps you and covers those injuries. And basically, you know, reform would mean, from a monetary standpoint, you know, maybe they only cover you up until a certain dollar amount. Maybe they cover different kinds for different injuries. So it's kind of up in the air as to if it would even be the MCCA that did that anymore. You know, a different kind of entity could be created, or a different way to manage the money.
It makes real good sense too, especially since we did away with Michigan's helmet law.
Right, yeah.
Actually, does not apply to motorcyclists.
Oh, okay, well.
I'll throw that out there. I don't think they currently get MCCA coverage.
What you have is that these tend to be relatively small numbers of people who have very high expenses, and so they don't necessarily have the best lobbying group in the sense of the patients themselves. Some of the institutions that take care of them have some clout, but
They've got Brooks Patterson,
well, they do.
which is
That's
a
true.
big part of the deal, because Brooks still got a lot of credibility, at least with the mainstream Republican Party. God knows who has influence on the Tea Party types, but Brooks, from his own personal experience.
Right.
I'll tell you, somebody else who's probably on that side too is Pete Secchia, the former Republican National Committeeman. He and his wife were in a very serious accident. It took them about 3 years to recover fully, and they still have aches and pains. So people have been through it. It changes your perspective. Sort of like Dick Cheney being for marriage equality because of his own personal situation. Once you've experienced it personally, it kind of puts a different slant on your ideology.
That's been the thing that's always unnerved me about Republicans. They seem unwilling to learn from the experience of others. They only learn when it affects them, and that teaches them empathy. And what we have to do, as a friend suggested, was we need to give each Republican now a poor child. Because right now they don't seem to have much empathy for poor kids in terms of their education
they
or
could
their
just
health care.
Pack
So
lunches for them.
we could make them do that.
Yeah.
We need some sort of program to
Paper
get.
bag lunches.
Well, the other interesting part of this debate, too, is how does it interface with the national changes through the Affordable Health Care Act, which eliminates caps on coverage?
Exactly.
Is it just going to be shifting the costs now from the auto insurers to the health insurers, or from the and to the federal government under Medicaid?
Well, one of the stranger things about what happens is what is covered under your automobile policy for health care versus what is covered under your health insurance. I
Usually it's
don't
a
believe
coordinated benefit.
Obamacare. Well, I mean, and my husband was in a train crash. And we were trying to figure out how to get him treated. And they said, well, you use your automobile policy. I said, no, he was in a train crash. He was in the train. He was not in the car. They said, no, it is actually your automobile coverage that covers you if you are in that moving conveyance, including the train.
I had a
So that's
similar
a whole separate, Obamacare does not, I don't believe, touch auto insurance.
I had a similar experience. I got hit by a car while on a bicycle, and my auto insurance was told they had to pick it up.
Isn't that bizarre?
I had left my car at home that day, but apparently the insurance still applies. So.
Wow. So if you don't have auto insurance, where does that leave? Do you have any idea?
I believe like the order that they told me at least, and this is from insurers and whatever, but it was that they funneled it first through my health insurance. My health insurance said my auto insurance, and then my auto insurance said the other lady's auto insurance. So,
They would subrogate against her. Yes,
I-
indeed. Oh, wow.
I don't think I ever saw any money, so.
No, no. He just got better,
As
thank
long as you
you.
didn't see a lot of bills.
I saw one bill, and after a while it disappeared, so maybe they did pay for it at some point.
That is going to be the future of our country, isn't it? I mean, we will either be investment bankers or we'll sell each other insurance. That's all there's going to be left. We don't make much anymore, so we have to figure out some way to stay afloat. Wow, that's heavy-duty lobbying, I would think, on the part of the insurers to get that piece of the puzzle off. I noticed that some of the insurers out in California are a little upset right now that some of their policies have been canceled. Obama had promised that you would be able to keep your insurance if you liked it. The challenge that we're running into with this new Obamacare, and I can't wait to see what happens with all these things, is that a lot of these policies didn't pass muster.
They didn't cover anything.
They didn't cover anything.
That's why, the people thought they were insured, but it's then they get in, they need it, and they find out, oh, that's not covered.
Right.
Anything else? Mm-hmm.
I was stunned to find out that McDonald's offered its own insurance policy, and it was like $50 a week. But it covered you, I think, up to like $2,000 worth of expenses. I mean, that was it. I mean, that's
Sounds like an Aflac policy.
yeah, it does. Yeah, it should fill in, and it would only cover the
Drive medicine.
yeah, by medicine.
Wave.
But I think the issue is, especially for people in my age bracket, maybe you don't want that much coverage. Maybe you're saying, I don't get in any accidents. I don't have any chronic health plans. I don't take any medications. Why, maybe I go to the doctor once a year for a cold. Why am I paying $200 a month for a policy?
I had an personal experience with that kind of explains it. People don't want to believe it. My stepdaughter rides horses, and her horse rolled on her when she was a teenager, and she ultimately required metal in the legs and all sorts of stuff, ambulances, and the bills were were huge.
Hundreds of thousands, I
But
suspect.
I'm not sure how much it was because I never saw it.
Nowadays they would be.
Because she was covered under my policy. But if she was uninsured, she was I think 14 years old.
Emily, I'm surprised to hear a young person say, but I don't get into accidents. I mean,
You just told us you got hit by a
Especially
bus.
isn't that sort of the
Don't ride your
definition of
bike.
accident? Is that you say, gosh, I didn't think that was going to happen to me. Or is accident, I'm going to run out in traffic and see what happens.
Well, I live in Lansing where I do have to do some commuting, but think about the young people that don't even want to drive cars. They're never in a car to get in a car accident. They live in New York or some other big city where they
The
don't
most
have
dangerous place in the world is your own home.
Right. Your bathtub. Seriously, 12,000 people a year die from falls. Now, why I know that statistic,
And
I'm not
burns.
clear, but I do know that
That's you use that
statistic.
as an excuse not to bathe, probably.
Well, probably, that's true too. But this idea that you won't be the person that shows up with some rare blood disorder or something like that. I mean, the challenge, the way that Obamacare is structured, is that you can always still get in. That's the loophole that I
I'm a
think
good
makes
driver.
no
Why do I
sense.
have auto insurance?
Right. Yeah.
Same argument.
Yeah. And that's
Because the deer is gonna run into your car soon.
No, I can avoid deer.
Okay,
See,
okay.
I'm a good driver.
Yeah.
I don't need auto insurance.
yes, yes. You have those deer whistles.
Tell that to the credit union.
Yeah.
Remember those deer
Oh,
whistles
yeah,
they
they
used to
didn't
sell?
work, by the way.
But they sold a lot of deer
Yeah,
whistles.
yeah. Mounted on each side of your fenders.
Yeah, that's right. The only thing it did was annoy pedestrians as you went by. Yeah, we have some interesting things coming up. Now, the transportation bill, some of us, given as we're talking about automobile accidents, I mean, it's the way my back teeth get injured as I go over the potholes and go ka-chung, ka-chung, ka-chung. That's the real injury we're going to face. So we don't stand a chance of that either.
I mean, people are saying that there's still movement. The Quadrant is meeting on it, the Senate Majority Leader, Minority Leader, and same with the House side. And the governor's still meeting on it, and he's kind of dropped from, we need a comprehensive road funding solution at one point, I think $1 billion a year, which would involve some sort of tax restructuring or other means of raising revenue. And he's sort of moved from that to the message of, well, for now we can try to do stuff kind of piecemeal. He said that the comprehensive solution is still the goal, but originally he had said it was the goal for the end of the year, and it doesn't sound like it's the goal for the end of the year anymore.
How would you say overall, has his popularity rebounded from the right to work debacle and all the rest of the problems that, I mean, when there was that lame duck session that put through all that legislation that really caused a lot of chaos in the state, there was even the move to recall him. I mean, he was part of that whole Republican Midwest governor, let's get rid of him kind of movement. Has he rebounded from that?
I think he has. He's a little bit separate from, the other governors that people want to bounce over this right to work issue. And I will say that the right to work issue kind of obfuscated a lot of the other stuff that happened at the tail end of that legislative session, which was really a lot. So on one hand, you have people finding out about, some of the other things that have passed, but on the other hand, the right to work legislation, right now, not a lot of contracts have ended. Not a lot of people are opting out of the unions. The unions haven't felt a ton of really big effect from that yet, other than perhaps on the mentality of their members. So, so far you don't have people saying, well, my mom used to be in a union and isn't anymore, or my neighbor got lost their protections because of. So I don't think that it's really had that long-lasting effect, but maybe it just hasn't hit yet.
Well, you've also got the more damning issue, and you can see it already in the campaigning that's going on at various levels, is the tax issue.
Right.
He pushed through the largest, I think the largest, if not one of the largest, individual tax increases in the history of the state.
A shift.
And that shift there's no getting around that. And that's an issue that everybody feels. We've only got like 15-20% union membership in this state. And Emily's right. The unions have not lost a lot of membership. Where it has hurt them is they've had to spend a lot more money on retention than before, and they've had to shift their budgets around. And I know I've talked with some folks at MEA, and they've done a lot of budget shifting, even though they said they've only lost 1% of their members, which is really amazing.
And the big question is whether they're going to be able to get the payroll deduction. That's going to be part of the whole.
That's causing them a problem too. And
yeah.
That is. But that issue will motivate them. Where the governor's got problems is he has no core constituency.
No.
You got to remember, he won the Republican primary 4 years ago with 25% of the Republican vote.
Right.
Because he was running against 4 extreme right-wing candidates, and they chopped up the core Republican vote, and he got what was left.
Right.
Sort of the Ballinger wing of the party, the Milliken wing of the party, which isn't much. And running
the
as a
only
Republican in
cohesive,
2010, they could have run Mickey Mouse, and he would have beaten any Democrat just because of the tone of the year. There's no core constituency there. You add up the groups that are angry with him for one reason or another that are fairly active: the unions, the LGBT community, seniors who are really, I know just from going door to door last year in my campaign, seniors were just beginning to feel the tax increase.
I took a look at my state taxes and was stunned.
Yeah, and also another very large group are governmental retirees that took a real hit.
Oh, they did.
I took a huge hit on my health.
And I don't think anybody in Detroit under an emergency manager now worried about their retirement from there is going to be.
Well, Detroit, he wasn't going to get. He wasn't getting
that.
5 votes there anyway.
But I do think you'll energize the other side. I hope.
To some extent.
Well, his problem is that I don't think the core of his party has never been wild about him. The Medicaid expansion, while was the right policy, fiscally and morally, is not going to help him within his party.
No.
And he could have the same problem in 2014 that Democrats had in 2010, which is your base staying home.
Well, see, I was out in Mason on Friday morning because I went to the wrong place. And
Downtown.
And there I was, and there were people putting lights on the Christmas tree. There's this big pine tree there by the court. It's a beautiful courthouse. God, that thing looks like it
Santa
was
mail, the Santa
painted,
mail thing.
yeah, by Courier and Ives. So I got out and I grabbed my camera and I started to take some photographs and talk with them. These are all members of the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and I asked them about right to work and what was happening. It's interesting. The last 2 years, the city has not been willing to pay to have them come out and string the lights on this tree that's planted there. They brought in some chopped tree, right, and put it up, and everybody said that was really tacky and ugly. So somehow they found enough in the budget to do this. But what made me happy, and this makes me happy, and it probably doesn't make anybody else happy, is there were 3 guys doing this, right? And see, there are plenty of people. I mean, I know from past experience that corporate America would want one person running around like at 90 miles an hour, putting up the lights on this, hanging off a yard arm if necessary, with no safety helmet, just to make sure that the thing got done fast. But these were people who, one was unrolling the lights, one was putting them up, the other one was checking. They had checked all the safety equipment. That's, to me, kind of what America is. Everybody should have a job. You should get to work together. I don't know that that's necessarily a popular view.
Well, they weren't really feather bedding either. I mean,
No.
that's what it probably took to do the job right.
I know when I had a fire at the pole at my home because there was a frizz with the connection and consumers, they put those people under so much pressure that it was 3 hours before anybody came there. It was late at night where I was afraid that there were sparks hitting the surrounding brush. And they have somebody come who shuts off the power and then somebody who comes to fix it because they have everything timed down to the minute where it's this corporate rush, 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 more work for and by fewer people. And that's sort of been the American mentality lately, is this like the speed up on the line at GM. I was glad to see maybe things are getting a little back to normal.
All I know is that we're replacing our gas fireplace in the living room with a new burner,
Yeah?
and I probably could install it. But my wife looked at me and says, "You're not doing this. We would prefer not to have our home blow up."
Exactly.
I think,
You
yeah.
want somebody in there who knows how to do the job, even though you probably can do it yourself or do it cheaper. It'll cost us $150, $200 to have a plumber come out and do it who actually knows what the heck they're doing.
Your neighbors will appreciate
And they can
this.
test it. They know how to test
Yeah, the
it.
condo association would probably be very pleased not to have our building blown up.
There may be a little clause in your contract with that
Yeah,
condo
you never know.
saying.
But that's the mentality that we're facing right now. Let's see how cheaply we can do things.
Yeah.
I really laugh when I look at all the problems they're having with the implementation of the website for healthcare. That's all been outsourced.
Oh, it has. And my first reaction was, well, that's what you get when you give it to the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
It was sole source.
Source. Yeah.
Sole source, no bids.
And it's not like it's unusual. I remember the space program. You remember the number of delays they had before Alan Shepard? Yeah, we're old enough to remember that. You're not.
They burned up three yes.
Alan Shepard was on that launch pad, I think, 5 times before he finally took that 300-mile trip, because it's complicated.
Yes.
And they were using a low bidder too. And Shepard commented on that later.
Yes,
that was his thought.
Much to his mother's chagrin.
Yeah.
He's sitting
How
on top of
truthful do you want to
He's
be?
sitting on top of a bomb that was built by the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
But those things are complicated. It happened, Rachel Maddow pointed out the other night, it happened when they implemented Social Security. It happened in '65 with Medicare. It happened with Bush with the with Part D.
They didn't have a website for 3 weeks. The due date came and went, and the website nothing for 3 weeks. But this is my concern in this case was that I think we knew ultimately that people were going to get paid for their prescriptions one way or another at inflated rates and rates that shouldn't happen. But this is a complete overhaul of existing policies as well, and I think that does make people nervous. I think there is a justifiable
First time we've
concern.
instituted a major government program with an organized group actively trying to subvert it during the implementation.
But I'm one of those people because I think that the individual mandate, I'm so far left, you see, that I'm criticizing it from the left.
I know the Heritage Foundation came up with it.
Well, I know, it's a bad idea. Always was a bad idea. And trying to force people into paying that mandate is a really bad idea. We should have gone for Medicare for all, and we should have taxed corporations at the rate that they were taxed back in the 50s and 60s.
Politics to me is the art of the possible.
Well, you know how things get possible? You fight for them.
Yeah, but the policy change is incremental. It's very rarely.
When you
revolutionary.
say the next words that you're going to be hearing, which are President Cruz.
Oh, you mean that Canadian guy?
Yes, yeah. Nobody seems too worried about that, do they?
No, where's Donald Trump now? Well, we need him.
I know. He's been a little silent on that issue.
Yeah.
My amusement was watching him learn how to hunt over the weekend out in Iowa. He looked
Dick,
as
Dick Cheney school of.
yeah, he looked almost as uncomfortable as John Kerry. I mean, I think that's going to come back to bite him. He did not look like a comfortable hunter.
And I've seen now people are starting to use his full name, which is
Raphael.
Raphael Eduardo or something like that.
Yes, yes. Well,
He's not fond of that.
It's not Hussein, but it's right up there.
well, yes.
It's ethnic.
It's going to be an interesting era because what do you think's happening with the Tea Party here in Michigan? Emily, when you're out there, do you see them still being as active?
They're as active, maybe even more active.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. I think,
Less visible in a way, though?
yeah, I mean, right now they're trying to bounce the lieutenant governor off the governor's ticket, which is a huge. If they could accomplish that, that would definitely, prove some of their muster to doubters out there. But they still haven't been really successful in doing the money and the fundraising that you need to do to be a successful political faction, I guess you would say.
They've been very good though grassroots organizing. When you compare the political organization of John Engler, who would never have tolerated this kind of shenanigans, as opposed to what you see with Rick Snyder, who's got no political chops really, it's really striking.
I think you may be ignoring how much times have changed since the Engler era. Engler didn't have to contend with an internet where you can go around the mainstream medium. You can go directly to people. I think that's what's made the big difference with the Tea
But
Party.
you talk about core constituencies too. It's really interesting to watch how the business community is reacting nationally and at the state level. It used to be when
I
the
think
Michigan
panic
State.
is the word you're looking for.
Well, it used to be when the state chamber of commerce said jump, the Republicans asked how high
Right.
on their way up, and now they've been fighting for transportation tax now for how many years? 4 or 5 years. And when the chamber calls for a tax increase, that's like hell freezing over.
Yeah.
And they can't get it. They can't produce any votes. Business leaders for Michigan can't produce very many votes on a lot of these tough issues that they're really important to them. And I find it interesting. General Motors has got a huge interest in fixing our roads. I know just my wife and I have had $1,000 in warranty repairs because of road damage.
Right.
We've had the front end replaced.
Pre-warranty,
on
they'd
one
have
car.
been happy.
Yeah, we had the front end replaced on one car 3 times under warranty, and it was not a manufacturing defect; it was potholes. But under the warranty, they had to pay for it.
I remember the days when, talking about what the car companies do and don't want, my late boss, Bob Trajano, was at Michigan State, who was director of the National Center for Community Policing, discovered back sometime, I think it was late 70s or early 80s, that they, because of trying to downsize the weight on cars, they put plastic around the steering column instead of metal. And what it meant was it was very easy to hotwire a car. All you had to do is take one little paper clip and you could hotwire a car. Cars were being stolen at alarming rates. I mean, I believe at one time in Newark, New Jersey, it was something like 2,500 cars a day were disappearing off the streets. So Trajano tries to contact GM to warn them about this because he's saying, all these kids are out there joyriding, getting into trouble, ruining their lives. All you got to do is put the metal back. Guess what? GM sold a lot of new cars as a result of that. And they weren't terribly
They were stripped
interested.
on the highway, yeah.
I watched. He crumbled. He was crushed at the thought. I mean, he was a straight arrow kind of guy, and he was
That's
sure that
why
as
the
soon as
Michigan-
they heard this, they'd change.
That's why the Michigan Automobile Theft Prevention Authority board consists mostly of people representing insurance companies.
Yes, yes. Although what strikes me as odd is you would think that insurance companies would want a breathalyzer in every car. It would take the cost I calculated once down to about 20 or 25 bucks. If you really did want to get rid of drunk driving, that's a pretty easy way to do it. Just put it in the center column there, and none of these cars will run. But they know how that would anger the people who love cars, right?
Save people who don't want mandatory insurance, probably.
Same ones that don't use their seatbelt.
Yes, and now what is it? A $500 fine
It's
that you're
big. Yeah, you don't want to get caught. You kind of want to do it every time.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I
It's
think
If
is
you need an
fine.
incentive, it's the penalties you now get from not doing things like
when they say click it and ticket, they
having
mean
your
it.
license, having your insurance with you. You don't want to pay those tickets.
And the new one now is that if you light up in a car with a child, they want that to be a $500 fine. How is that going to play?
I swapped emails with Samsung on that this morning because I asked him, one of the interesting parts of that is it would impact a under 18 driver riding alone because they couldn't light up because there was a minor in the car. them.
Ah.
Now, Sam
Oh,
pointed
a
out
conundrum.
Sam pointed out technically they shouldn't. It's illegal for them to be in possession of cigarettes.
That's
Like
true.
that's not being enforced anyway.
Yeah, right.
No, not an 18-year-old.
No, but 17 and
Oh,
16,
right.
which is what the other bill impacts. But we already have mandatory use for younger kids, at least, of car seats,
Well, yeah, yeah.
and is along with the seatbelt requirement and things like that. So it's intellectually consistent with what we've done in the past. I don't think it'll ever come out of committee.
We're starting to go this sort of, I mean, the Democrats are getting tagged as being the nanny state. But yet I was surprised to hear that come up here. Was that a Democratic initiative?
Yeah, Sam Singh
Yeah.
introduced it.
Has he introduced it? I mean, I think that's the Bloomberg idea that you're going to tax sugary drinks and you're going to start. I mean, there's this sense that and I think all it does is really, it may not accomplish that much, but it certainly inflames the
Well,
libertarian
it's also
Rand Paul
it's
group.
consistent with the ban on smoking in restaurants and bars
Yeah.
and in other public places.
Yeah.
Because again, it's an attack on secondhand smoke. It doesn't say you can't ruin your lungs, you just can't ruin mine.
Yeah, but it says you should be able to ruin the lungs of your own child.
In the house.
In the house.
Yeah,
Right.
that'd be the next step, would be banning it in the home.
That's coming.
And then instead of worrying about medical marijuana in the home, worrying about cigarettes in the home, which actually is much more damaging
It
to
is.
the kid.
It is, yeah. No, I'm not arguing. And public policy, I mean, we do see, the research does confirm that if you start making the fines high enough, you do change a certain percentage, sort of the low-hanging fruit. The people who are wavering anyhow will be the ones to change. The real hardcore won't. And that's going to be part of the challenge. They're often the ones that are causing you the most difficulty, but that's
It's
going to be
It's
tempting.
like raising the price of cigarettes. It does decrease the number of people
Yeah.
that smoke every time,
The challenge is that if you raise it high enough, you get a nice black market.
right?
Yeah, but it hasn't stopped us from drinking.
No,
No,
not at all.
no, but again, raise it high enough and you get a nice bathtub gin black market.
Yeah.
Yeah. My granddad was good at that. I don't know if he ever handed down the family recipe.
Well, we've got a local election coming up here in
Oh,
Lansing
yeah.
too. The
Yes.
People may have missed it, except I've gotten about 20 pieces of literature since it started.
Now that's mostly for the council races, not for the
Council-
mayor, right?
I've gotten one
Well,
piece for the mayor.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like the mayor's campaigning real hard for
I
himself.
wouldn't think.
I've gotten mail from the mayor, but it was in support of, I think it was just Dunbar.
Yep, so one piece I got too.
I
And-
got one that was the Lansing Jobs Coalition. And
I had that one.
Yeah,
It was
so
four
that was the
people
mayor
before.
and Dunbar and
Yeah.
a couple others.
And then
York
there was an
Owen.
anonymous piece that went out, a hit piece on Brian Jeffries from, I can only trace it as far as Matt Muxlow, who's a Republican political operative, and he wouldn't say who paid for it. And the committee that
What
was
did it say?
he's a jobs killer and he's against public safety, which is hilarious because the cops have endorsed him.
Yeah.
It was and it was the usual attack piece thing that took a couple of votes out of context and ramped them up. But what I always find offensive with these pieces are the ones that go out from anonymous sources. This is a committee that's not registered with the state or the county. The person who put it out, return address on it was Matt Muxlow's home in Lansing. And I contacted him both through Facebook. I left a message for him at his legislative office, and he finally emailed me and said he's no comment. 4 times. He doesn't want to admit who. And those are the kinds of things. I got hit in my campaign last year with an anonymous robocall,
Oh, did
which
you?
I think was relatively effective. We happened to be doing some polling at the time, and our numbers dropped as the robocall went out. And those things, they just irritate me, and I don't care who they're against. I'm not saying I'm for or against Brian Jeffries. I'm very offended by the piece that went out against him. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that kind of garbage, although I understand that there have been a couple of pieces. I haven't seen them in the Fourth Ward.
I'm in the fourth ward, and I've gotten maybe I would say 5 or 6 hit pieces on Brian Jeffers, and some of them are duplicates, and they all hit on the theme of
Anything on
Jeffers.
Canfora or Yorko, though?
No hits, but definitely the pro pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had a couple at my address that are pro Canfora, obviously against Yorko, but it's taking on her
It's policy
Absent-
stuff.
absenteeism.
That I thought would be the
It's a
issue.
reasonable issue.
Yeah.
And as long as it's identified, I really don't care what they say if they identify the source.
Well, it's
Doing it,
pretty
unless
clear.
they flat
Yeah,
out
it's pretty
lie.
clear who it is. But you're saying that there's absolutely no transparency when you can spend money. You don't have to identify where it comes from.
Yeah, Muxlow's got a client. He won't say who the client is, and under state law, he doesn't have to. And he's enjoying
The worst
it.
ones that aren't even mailed and you find under your windshield wiper, those are the ones that you really have
I was
to-
involved in a campaign down at Pittsfield Township once, where we ran into that the day before the election.
See, that give you a lot of
Had no
time to
time to respond. It was
Yeah.
just a flat out lie,
Yeah.
but it was a good one.
Yeah. Did it work?
We lost.
Ew.
I don't know if that was
Walt,
why.
do you think one of the things that's kind of lining up here is Venera wants his team in? Do you think his team's going to be able to defeat Jeffries?
I don't think he's going to lose any ground on council. I think Yorko's going to beat Canfora. No question, Tina Houghton's going to get reelected. That's not even close. Her opponent's barely campaigning, Charles Hoffmeyer. And two of the three viable at-large candidates are in his camp, with Judy Brown Clark and Kathy Dunbar. So at worst, if Jeffries is reelected, the other seat will be somebody who's more amenable to working with the mayor. So he's not going to lose any ground. He stands the opportunity, though, to pick up a seat by knocking Jeffries off. And I think, based on the primary, anything can happen. The turnout was really low in the primary. I think it was 8%.
Whoa.
The margin from first to third was rounding error, pretty much.
Hmm.
And the campaign, they're all working hard. Uh, and each one of them's got their strengths, each one of them's got their weaknesses. And there's really no way to read it because, again, with a low turnout election, it's organization. There, certain groups can have an undue influence. LGBT group, if it turns out, can have a big impact on the election because it's a relatively large constituency.
Now, are there enough distinctions between the candidates on those issues that would matter to them to bring them out?
I think they're subtle, but there are differences.
Okay.
The only one who's gotten the highest endorsement of the at-large candidates is Dunbar. Jeffries and Brown Clark have received favorable ratings, but not the top rating.
Well, one of the things also is Chris Swope is unopposed, so that could depress that vote.
Mm.
I mean, there's no pressure to come out to vote to make sure Chris gets reelected.
It's
It's a
it's
tough
it's
to
a, it's a
tell.
real crapshoot in a
Yeah.
local election. It's identifying your voters and getting them out because you'll be looking tops of 20% turnout.
Can anybody afford polling on any of these races? Do they do
Yes,
any of
I
it?
got a robocall the other day.
Ah.
Yeah, robocall polling is really cheap. It
Ah,
costs next to nothing. It's like 10 cents a call.
I see. And what kind of a sample would they use for Lansing?
Oh, it can be any size you want to pay for. I know in my campaign we use samples of 400 for a House district, which is roughly is a little bit smaller than the city of Lansing.
That sounds like the kind of thing you could set up on a website.
But it takes 2,000 calls to get 400 responses.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Because it's very hard, and usually choose one, two, or three. I read the script, it's almost a transcription of a push poll that went out there that was doing message testing, which involved both positive messages on the three major. We're ruling Ted Odell out as the fourth candidate at large. Sorry, Ted, but you're going to finish fourth. But the
Hope
top
he's not
three.
listening, so he quits
No,
campaigning.
he's not campaigning.
Well, he is listening to LCC Radio,
He's not-
89.7 in Lansing, Michigan.
Okay. He's not doing a lot of campaigning. He's got a new job that's taken him away from the campaign quite a bit. He hasn't got any money or an endorsement, so he's very likely to finish fourth. But they tested positive messages on the other three candidates in this robocall, and then they went into negative messaging on the two incumbents, but not Judy Brown Clark. I think part of that, I talked to Judy about it, I don't think she's behind it necessarily, but she said, well, one of my advantages is I don't have a record.
Right.
It's very hard to attack somebody.
Her record is the Olympics.
Yeah, well, well, you could attack her for finishing second. What a slacker.
Yeah, well, she could have had a
She
goal.
only got a silver medal. She got a gold. Could have gotten a gold, got a silver. But realistically, there's very little there to attack because she's actually got, outside of government, quite a bit of experience that's relevant. So you can't go after that. She's got no voting record to go after. But there were negative questions on both Jeffries and Dunbar. And it was clearly, I don't think it was push polling as much as it was message testing. And there's a fine line between the two. So quite honestly, I don't know where it came. It was anonymous, of course.
I think the Dems are really, I mean, they're really putting a major push now into trying to get women to run for all these local offices. They feel that, I think, I mean, we've seen Emily's List get very active. We've seen the DNC get very active and talking about the need to start recruiting more women at the local level.
Well, at most we're going to have
the-
2 men out of 8 city council members, and if Jeffries goes down, it'll be 1.
Vagina Gate last summer reminded everybody, and the things we're seeing in Texas, they're now, I mean, it's sort of interesting. Now they're really trying to disenfranchise women in Texas. You have to show up. You can't have a copy of your marriage certificate or your divorce decree. You have to have the original in order to be able to register to vote, and it has to be so that your name is consistent with whatever it is that your legal name is. Your driver's license may be different. You may be hyphenated. If the hyphen isn't there, you don't qualify. They think as many as 1/3 of women voters will be disenfranchised under this new effort.
Something
And
tells me Eric Holder is going to be visiting Texas.
the whole goal is to get rid of Wendy Davis.
Oh,
Because, but I mean, I think that what happens is even though that takes place down in Texas, the word gets out. And then people here get irritated. It doesn't have anything to do with our voting situation, but voters in Michigan get angry when they hear about things like that.
The nice part about this whole thing is you do still have the federal courts as a remedy. And by today's standards, the people even that George Bush appointed are not crazy.
Really?
Well, compared to what you got now.
Oh, it's a relative.
They're relatively moderate
Relatively,
compared to what's going on now, and they overturned the abortion laws down there, put a hold on them just today.
I remember when I was talking with a political analyst about 20 years ago, and he was saying, there is a collusion between the parties. He said they both really, even though there are some crazies in the Republican Party, they don't really want the death penalty. And so they'll probably, do things to make sure that that doesn't come rip-roaring back and lots of people are killed, this kind of thing. That sort of tacit agreement broke down somewhere along the line where there was this idea that the elites got together and kept things within a fairly narrow range. And I do again think that one of the big differences has been that as we've moved to a digital world where people can go direct, those messages get out. Glenn Beck can build up a huge online audience. He was too bold for Fox, so they got rid of him. But boy, he's got a huge online audience, a lot of pull there.
And a huge income.
He does. He does. And it is a moneymaker for all of them.
Oh, it is. It's Limbaugh, Beck, Sarah Palin created a whole new industry for herself.
Cottage industry, yeah.
And made herself extremely. There's quite a few people, mostly on the right, but some on the left as well, getting extremely wealthy off of basically preaching to a small minority of voters.
Just as a lot of people are suggesting that Cruz knew, for example, the votes weren't there, that he wasn't going to be able to get Obamacare repealed. But what he could do was build up the kind of audience where, whether he gets the nomination or not, he probably will never, ever win a presidential election, but he'll have a huge contract with a radio station and TV and a website. I mean, he'll make a fortune after that.
And he's built his brand. And I think that there is a group, and he may be a part of it, that truly wants to make the Republican Party the party of the far right.
Oh, he does.
And
Yeah,
I'm not sure
he may be
voters are pure
sincere.
from the standpoint whether it's mercenary or ideology driven or whatever it is. He's very effective at it. But he's also guaranteed he can't win a national election.
He must be smart enough to do the math, though. I mean, he knew that his ploy for doing anything substantive about rolling back any part of Obamacare wasn't going to work. It was really a chance to gin up support for his own movement. His website, they made somewhere around $2 million during that little effort. Meanwhile,
so
we
he's also
lost
taking on
24
Rand
billion.
It was a direct shot at Rand Paul, who had a very effective filibuster earlier.
Do you think he's still the most likely to get the Republican Rand Paul?
That's Chris Matthews' theory. I'm not sure it's mine.
I'm asking.
I don't know at this point because, obviously, if they're smart, if they want to win the election, they're going to nominate Christie because he's the most electable. They use that argument for Romney too, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
But that's
He's
the
not
argument.
terribly popular with that base. And
No, he's not. I don't think he can get the nomination.
I think even if he got the nomination, the base isn't going to come out for him, just like they didn't come out for Romney.
Yeah, and we haven't had a president that size. And speaking of somebody that size myself, you got to go back to Taft, where we've had a president.
He's half the man he was.
Well, he's not. I give him credit for 50 pounds, and having gone through those battles, I sympathized with him totally.
Well, he did the stomach staple.
And so did I.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. How do you feel?
I'm still here. Actually, I'm actually down about 100 pounds from where I want my peak. And yeah, I wish him all the best. But the reality is, we tend to vote for fit people for president, and have for a long time. I think it's one of the many things that hurt John McCain.
Yeah.
Especially
when the melanoma came out just before.
Although it didn't hurt him as much as Sarah Palin, but still, that was a side issue.
She was the actual cancer. The melanoma was.
One of the things I'd like to ask Emily, too, because I don't watch television now, so I don't know what's going on in the local election on television. Is there a lot of
Oh, that's a good
advertising
question.
yet?
I don't see it either.
No, it's too expensive.
It's too expensive.
There's not enough money in any of the campaigns. So typical city council campaign, if they've got 30,000, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I think Dunbar had 34. She had the highest.
Okay, and that you can't even do much radio at that point. That's basically direct mail. Having gone through, I thought I was going to be doing a lot of radio last time, and I ended up spending about 30 grand, and I didn't spend one nickel on broadcast.
Hmm.
It was all mail. It was most of my money went to the post office.
What about YouTube? Is YouTube turning out to be an effective alternative?
Um, no, I mean it's clicks away, right? So to get to a YouTube video, maybe you click on it on a person's Facebook page, or you get to it by, God forbid, typing in YouTube.com search terms. If you're doing that, you're already really interested in that candidate. So I don't think it's a way to introduce yourself to new people as a candidate.
I think if you do it well with humor, you stand a chance. I mean, I have the Jesse Ventura attitude toward online media.
Well, it's the
That if you
Bridget
put
McCormick
together
exception.
this kind of
That's true.
alternative campaign,
Yeah.
which I do think gives some opportunity for independents that may sneak in occasionally and do that kind of internet campaign.
Yeah.
I did go down and video the Bridget McCormick and the others when they came to LCC and put up a video, and it got a lot of hits. People were very
Well,
interested.
that was the exception to the rule, but that was a truly extraordinary video.
Well, her video, right?
Her
I mean,
video
yeah,
made
when,
possible
when
by-
your sister is part of the West
When your
Wing.
sister
Right.
was the national security advisor in the mythical West Wing, and everybody's working there, even to the point where about the only one they didn't have was Sorkin, right in the script.
I thought they did.
No, Sorkin didn't do that.
Oh, I thought he did.
Yeah,
Sure
I-
sounded like him.
Yeah, well, the cast at that point could have lip Sorkin.
Well, exactly.
In Sorkinese, I guess you'd call it.
So it pays to have friends in high places, or sisters in this case.
Sister in a high place, and they had fun with it. But that was so. It was just one of those one in a million things that's
Yeah.
going to happen until you get to the national level.
Ventura did it on a postage stamp budget, and I still think somebody else could do it again. I mean, when you take a look at viral videos, I've been watching my favorite is Maple Bacon. Just go to Google, put in Maple Bacon YouTube. It's the talking dog, and that kind of stuff. I'm a sucker for the talking dog. Give me a talking dog. I may run again just to be able to use little Lemmy, the Chihuahua, the new Chihuahua.
Chihuahua.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, there's an ethnic vote there too. Right?
there is, and you know what? I have a velvet sombrero for him. I did. I bought years ago a velvet sombrero because I was doing a movie about my dog, my former dog, and I was going to have the Mexican hairless Chihuahua from next door crawl under the fence to discuss immigration policy. So I went out and I had a little velvet sombrero made for the dog, and the dog
was
died
there?
before I got the video
Oh, I was
made.
gonna say, dog probably didn't want to put it on.
Yeah, I ran Schmoopsy for governor years ago. Schmoopsy was very popular for a while.
I've been intrigued with the city council race too, because I'm in Tina Hoden's ward, so I'm not getting door knocks from them. But I haven't seen any evidence of the campaign in my neighborhood to speak of. I see a few.
Isn't she the one that didn't pay her property tax? Big
Oh,
scandal.
She fixed that though, and
She
she was
fixed that. It was one of those. It was one of those
How
big
do you-
kerfuffles.
Why does that only get put down as a kerfuffle? If I didn't pay my property tax, I'd consider that a big deal.
Well, because if you pay the penalty, to me, it's sort of like paying your credit card late. There's penalties for it that are built into it, and it's almost like, to me, it's a cash management issue. And if your
So
personal
she
cash,
should handle ours?
she did it in compliance with the law, just like people juggle bills. That's what the city council does now. Is they juggle bills. Figure out what they can pay for with limited resources. To me, it's not the major thing. It certainly wasn't enough to get anybody to mount a serious campaign against
It
her.
surprised me.
Yeah.
It did. It surprised me. I
well,
thought that it
I think part of
disqualified
it
her.
was how she handled it. She obviously had to pay it off. She wanted to keep her home, but she also was sorry.
Ah.
I mean, she didn't.
Contrition works. We
Yeah,
are big on
I
giving people
should not
second
have
chances.
done this.
Yeah.
Sort of effect.
Yeah.
Usually, it's the cover-up of something that kills you.
Yeah.
Although I'm really curious to see what happens with this campaign finance complaint against the mayor. I don't think
Right.
I don't think he can prove it in a million years. It looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, but you need DNA.
What about the
prove
Nerd
it's a
Fund? Emily, have you been covering the Nerd Fund?
I have, yeah. I'm not sure it's an issue that really resonates with voters or will for a long period of time. But yeah, the governor's been benefiting from this nonprofit that exists, the Nerd Fund, New Energy to Reinvent and Diversify.
A nerdy title.
They had to come up with something to go with
A little bit of
NERD.
a mouthful, yeah. But I think the most controversial thing that this fund has been doing is funding an advisor for the governor. So Richard Baird and the governor have connections going back a long way in his business career. And he's had an office in the governor's suite, just talking and advising and consulting, which isn't unusual. That's the role of a lot of people that typically surround a governor, but usually the governor pays those out of the state funds. There's like an unclassified position. The governor gets 8 of them, I believe. And they don't have to take part in the civil service or anything like that. But this guy was outside of any of that, and he was just being paid by this nonprofit who didn't disclose its donors.
A lot will depend on when the bankruptcy rulings come down in Detroit.
Yeah.
And you can tie those two together. But I think it's part of a larger meme that the Democrats are trying to promote, that Snyder is basically uh, just doing the bidding of the rich elite,
Right.
the super CEOs that he's bought and paid for by his fellow CEOs. It's certainly his first campaign was paid for mostly
But his
by
instincts seem
non-voters.
more corporate than they do Democratic.
Yeah, and you combine that with some of his tax policy, which is very easy
Yeah.
to position as pro-corporate, anti-individual. That's the campaign. It's going to be a populist campaign against him. It's going to be countered
Is Shower
by.
well known enough, do you think?
I don't think that's really matters.
I don't think he is, and I think the Republicans have done a pretty good job of painting. Shower doesn't know who donated to his funds either, so really no politician has clean hands in this whole nonprofit scheme. Yeah, I don't want to call it a scheme, but
Well, we would
not
like
unpopular.
we would like to wrap it up here and thank Emily Lawler from MERS and Walt Zork from the Lansing City Post for our discussion this evening. And as we coming up on our election season, tune in next Monday night at 7 o'clock for Lansing Online News Radio on WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, LCC Radio. We have a problem sometimes where our clocks don't